Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazo.
Brothers and sisters, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so blessed to have this brother back with us who was one of the speakers at our Worldview Matters conference in Green Bay. Was it a month ago? My goodness, time's flying. Redeem the time, Mr. Tim Chaffey. He is an author and also the content manager of the Attractions Division of Answers in Genesis. He oversees the development of content for the exhibits at the Ark Encounter, the Creation Museum. He also writes articles for the Answers in Genesis website and gives presentations at the Ark Encounter and Creation Museum. He's also a regular co-host on Answers News, as well as a producer and co-host of the award-winning movie analysis show Tilt Shift. It's on Answers TV, and a brand new book is out that you guys need to get. It is called Watch What You Watch: Understanding the Worldviews and Philosophies in Modern Movies. And that's what we're going to be talking about today with author Tim Chaffey. Good to see you, brother.
David, great to see you as always.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe, it's been already a little over a month since that conference. It was a great time. I enjoyed being there, meeting everybody, and I always enjoy being back home. So it was great to see family too.
It was great to have you, and we're planning one for next year. Feedback has been through the roof positive. I was so encouraged. But I want to let everybody know, if you want to get all the sessions of the speakers, we now have the individual sessions, not just the massive video of the live stream. We have individual videos up at the YouTube channel for Worldview Matters David Fiorazo. Look under the playlist, Worldview Matters 2026 Conference. Tim's is up there. I've shared that on my website, on my social media. All the sessions that are there. I still have a couple more I need to share. But look up the sessions. His was phenomenal. They were all so good. But Tim, again, thank you. It was great to have you here. And glad it worked out while you were in town. But about this book, Hollywood has been at it for a long time with their, not just influencing young people and people in general against the biblical worldview, but now I think we can safely say there's a hostility toward biblical worldview and Christianity, and that comes out in TV, it comes out in movies. So go ahead. I mean, your wife was also one of the authors on this book, right? Didn't
Yep.
Casey help you with this one? So tell us
why
you write all kinds of theological issues, all kinds of different topics you talk about, but why did you decide to go down this road for this book?
So actually, it's interesting you brought my wife up. She and I met in a movie theater back in the mid 90s.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
Rochester, Minnesota. I was a manager of a movie theater, and she would come in. I won't tell the whole story, but she fell for me. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And so movies have always been a big part of our relationship, from the beginning, and it's continued that way all the way through. We've been married almost 30 years now at the end of this year. And so a lot of our relationship has included watching movies together. Obviously, we have certain standards of what we will and won't watch. But one thing that we wanted to make sure that we do, and we've been doing this for a couple decades now, is we don't just watch to be entertained. Even though there are times where it's entertaining, but we want to make sure we understand that we're discerning what messages are being promoted, and whether good or bad, because it's a lot of times what Christians will do is they take one of two approaches, and they do this with a lot of topics. But with movies, it's thou shalt not ever. All these are wrong, they're bad because Hollywood's evil, and don't ever spend any of your dimes there at all, no matter what. Or hey, all things are lawful for me. I'm gonna watch whatever I want to watch. And but as with other areas of life, we have to show discernment. We do have liberty in Christ to watch those things, but that doesn't mean that we should be watching those things. We should be looking for the things that edify and build up, and that are honorable and true and noble. But we also know that our culture is inundated with movies. I'm just going to read a couple lines from the back cover.
Sure.
The top 4 lines: "May the force be with you. As you wish. You shall not pass. You're a wizard, Harry." I'll bet most people hearing those words heard those words in the voices of the characters who said those words in the movies. because those things stick with us. Movies are they're powerful, and television as well. Music can do the same thing. You hear a song that you hadn't heard since you were a kid riding the bus, 30 years ago, and suddenly the lyrics are right there again. You
Hmm.
remember where you were when you heard
Yeah.
that. And so those things have that they are very powerful tools of communication, and they can be used for good, and they can be used for very evil purposes as well.
Yes. I do want to mention, just while I thought about it, I was thinking, well, what can people watch this? It's clean and family friendly and positive and glorifying to God and would actually edify a family. And I thought there's a couple new channels or new networks that are out now. I know there's PureFlix and there's other things, but on television there's the Great American Family Channel is one. Positive, I think it's Positive without the E on the end, Positive Network. There's a lot of things, places where we can get movies, but I saw As You Wish, and I'm thinking, man, The Princess Bride. That's such a classic. But in the 90s, you said you met Casey in the 90s, and you were working at the theater. It seems to me, if I remember right, that was a decade that movies got really uber sexual. I mean, really, they took a turn to see. I mean, they're pressing the limits of censorship. And I was talking to you before we got on the air about on television, the FCC and their lack of regulation. How are movies regulated in the theaters, or what Hollywood puts out to movie theaters and the rating system? Isn't that just bizarre? Some of these things that you're thinking that cannot be PG-13,
It's interesting because my wife and I, we've in about 5 to 10 years ago started watching a lot of classic oldies. I'm going to call them that, and I mean earlier than 1975 or earlier than me, 1973.
Okay.
So earlier than that, and there was some stuff that was pretty risque even in those, that we were really surprised at some of the things, because we always think about it being like the good old days, or that this was a lot more wholesome, and to a degree that's true, but sin still abounded in the 50s and the 60s, and especially in the 60s and into the 70s. And so what we wanted to do is like a different approach with, you mentioned the show Tilt Shift. Well, that's what this book came out of, that show. My wife and I, we had been watching a couple of movie analysis shows on YouTube, and the certain individuals would have a pretty interesting approach to how they're watching these movies. And I thought, wouldn't it be, we talked about what she'll say she thought of it. I think I did, but she's probably right. That wouldn't it be great to have a biblical worldview analysis of the movies? People are watching these things. Why not have something that's available to show people, look, here is what's being promoted in these films. Here's this messaging that's going on. Here's something that they're doing really well, and be able to pick those out, because a lot of people just turn they check their brains at the door when they turn the TV on. And we really shouldn't do that. And so we got the idea for the show, and thought who else would be a good co-host. And so we contacted Brian Osborne, one of our speakers, a good friend of mine, and it took off from there. And so we've had 4 seasons of it now, where we do 8 episodes each season, and the last 2 we've actually had a bonus Christmas episode. So we've had 30 and a live episode as well. So we've got like 35 episodes that we've done. Received a great response. We've had a couple of negatives, like, I can't believe you're not telling people to not watch this movie. And intro says this isn't your typical movie review show. We're not telling you whether you should or shouldn't watch the films that we review, and we're not endorsing the characters in those movies either. But we're trying to get you to think from a biblical perspective about these things, to shift your thinking to align with the Word of God. And so a good example of that, and when the show came out 4 years ago, something that had just come out on streaming was a movie called Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds.
That's right.
And I'm not endorsing the whole movie or anything like that. There's a lot of crude humor. It's PG-13. But the whole point of the movie, if there's a couple of analogies in there that are so perfect for us. One, he's this video game character who doesn't have any parts or any lines or anything, and he just, it's like a Grand Theft Auto type thing, where he worked at a bank, and it's being robbed all the time by all the players who are coming in. Well, the players actually have sunglasses on. The non-players like him don't. And one day he starts to question something, and he ends up picking up a pair of these sunglasses, and suddenly he sees everything differently. He sees what the players are seeing. He sees that there's more to this quote unquote reality. I know it's a video game, but and it's that perfect analogy for us as far as worldviews. When you have on the right set of lenses, you see things completely differently than if you have the wrong set of lenses. And we want people to have a biblical worldview. So there was a really good analogy there. But the whole movie, the premise of the movie is that this video game it was designed by the creator of the video game to be this perfect, paradise world that you can walk around and just enjoy things. It's not a shoot 'em up. It's not all this violence like so many video games. And then a big tech company took it over and turned it into this this thing where it's full of all the blood and guts and violence and everything. And the way to fix that was that the creator of the video game put himself in the game to lead the people back to this perfect world. And when you see this perfect world at the end, you've got people walking around with dinosaurs, and it's like, it's so close to the biblical message as far as like the story arc itself and the plot and everything. But obviously there's all sorts of garbage that goes along with it. And so if you're familiar with that movie, or if your neighbors watch it, can you use that to help explain the gospel to them and help them maybe understand it in a way that they wouldn't have got it before? And so that's one of the things we're doing with the show. Yeah, we'll call out when there's in that movie, there's some good examples. There's a scene where the guy who is made the video game is kind of complaining about how it's taken over, and the other guy says, "Well, it sounds like a whole bunch of white privilege to me," or something like that. So it just assumes white privilege is a thing, and there's just a bunch of little one-liners like that.
Yeah.
That are kind of throwaway lines, but the more you hear it, the more it becomes reality. The more you think that, oh, this must be true. Global warming is thrown into so many things. It must be true. And
interesting.
So there's a lot of those little things too. But there's times where they do something really well, and we should acknowledge that.
Well, that leads me to my question about in the table of contents. First of all, the chapter titles, just the first 5: worldviews, postmodernism, wokeness, blurring lines, toxic feminism, evolution. But let's go back to worldviews, Tim. And what are some ways that entertainment subtly communicates worldview ideas without directly stating them? Because they put it in there subtly oftentimes.
Oh yeah, well, think about a biblical view of marriage and sex within marriage. It's made for one man, one woman for life, right?
Yeah.
But how is it usually portrayed in movies? Over 90% of the time that sex is either depicted or hinted at in movies, it's between unmarried couples, and it's viewed as if it's perfectly acceptable. You have little kids, anybody using crude language, but a lot of times little kids using foul language, and just so many different things. The Harry Potter movies are good examples of movies that have some really good qualities, showing courage and sacrifice and loyalty and friendship, some really good virtues, but also there's situational ethics. Harry can sneak out at night. Why? Because he can break the rules at the school because he's the good guy, and the ends justify the means in a sense when you have that sort of morality. And so it's whether or not they're not coming out and saying that, but that is what they're depicting. And so that shows that part of it's not coming from a biblical perspective, where we would say, no, it's wrong because you're not supposed to be doing this.
So it's interesting, not to mention witchcraft, and that's very subtle as well. And that really took off in the 90s. And we actually saw an explosion of the kids experimenting and dabbling with casting spells and things. So movies are so influential. You started out by talking about when we were kids and the movies we watched, and you remember music and movies, both. You remember songs and you remember movies from when you're growing up. And they're very, very influential. So you say each of these themes, they're given their own chapter, and in each chapter you give several examples from Hollywood and explain. That's very helpful, I think, for people to go to connect the dots, because we see movies, we don't even really put our biblical lens on, or our discerning glasses on, and sometimes it helps people to point stuff out. I think who did a good job of that years ago on the radio was Plugged In Online. They used to do the movie reviews without saying, don't watch this or go see this one. But they just said, here's how much profanity, here's how many sexual scenes. And so I think that was very helpful. So, Tim, go ahead and share whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the reasons why on the show we started off the way we do it, because we actually say several other websites do that already. So like Plugged In and some other ones, they're telling you here's how many times they say this bad word, here's how many scenes, and we're like, well, we're not going to do all that. We're going to tell you it's PG-13 and here's why. Give the local the warning about it. And then if you want to find out all the bad stuff, you go and read something like Unplugged In. But our goal is to help you look at the philosophy, the worldviews. So you mentioned toxic feminism. That has been huge in the movies for about the last 10 years, since that horrendous Ghostbusters 2016, the one with all female cast came out. It's so terrible. And there've been a bunch of others, like the newer Charlie Angels movie that came out a few years ago. We did an episode where we compared woke women versus strong women. And if you look at the characteristics of the woke women, they're so unlikable. Look, they're supposed to be so perfect. They know everything already. They're better than everybody at every single thing. They don't have to train for anything because they already know everything. And they're so unrealistic as people, because you can't relate to that, because we're all broken. We all make mistakes. And yet the strong women are the ones who are willing to work with men. They don't have to denigrate men like the woke women do. They can display femininity. They can be vulnerable. They can stumble and fall and then get back up, and that shows true character and true strength. Whereas the other ones are just it's this, for whatever reason, that Hollywood has been pushing this ideal for strong independent woman, and yet they're completely unlikable, and I think that's by design. I think they're doing what they can to destroy the family and what men should be and what women should be. And so I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of these roles.
So, Tim, I'm going back and just looking at some research briefly, because I mentioned the FCC and the Parents Television Council on TV, but movies. Explain, if you can, how the rating system, how does it, I mean, some of this stuff is offensive and it's a PG-13, and you're thinking, I don't understand how that's allowed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So back it wasn't until like 1980, I think 85, it might have been end of 84, but I think it was late 85 or early 85 when they instituted PG-13. Before that, you had rated G, and that was supposed to be like general audience, everybody, it's okay. But even in some of the rated G movies, you would have some things that are not really appropriate. And then you had PG. And before 1985, PG could have a whole bunch of stuff that today we would look at, that's definitely PG-13, or maybe you could say PG-16, like it's almost rated R. And so PG-13 helped to separate some of those things, but still, I say PG stands for profanity guaranteed, because you're still gonna have some rough language in there. Yeah, you're not gonna, you probably won't have nudity. You're not gonna have like graphic violence necessarily. But you can have some of that stuff in PG-13, and of course, rated R is kind of a free for all, and then NC-17 is even worse. And so most Hollywood movies they aim for PG-13 nowadays, because those are the ones that draw the biggest crowds. That's the biggest blockbusters are generally PG-13, and because you don't want it so family friendly and tame that none of the teenagers are going to want to see it, because that's not cool. And you don't want it rated R where you can't get the teenagers in there because they're too young, and so they shoot for that PG-13.
But yet those are some of the most, I mean, the family friendly movies are some of the most popular and successful movies at the box office, but Hollywood just doesn't seem to get it. Actually, I don't think they want to, right?
No, and there's a really good example of this. The movie Galaxy Quest, which if you're familiar with that, it's like a Star Trek spoof, and it's a beloved film. I mean, it was made late 90s. It was supposed to compete with Harry Potter because that was coming out at the same time. And when they filmed it to be PG-13 or maybe even R. The language is very rough in the original, but the studio wanted it to be PG because they wanted something to compete with that family movie. And they toned it down, and the actresses were upset about it. But it is so much better as a result. there's a scene where you can still see the person's mouth is saying the wrong word. That's not what comes out in the audio, and it's very clear. But so many people will watch that with their kids now because it is a relatively clean movie compared to some of the other stuff out there, and it's very funny. It's well made. It's got a lot of a lot of virtuous things in it. In fact, we feature that in one of the chapters on identity, and we talk about that in that chapter. But they don't learn. Like, look, that movie, people love it because it was something they could watch with their kids, and they have that memory. Now those kids are old enough to have their own kids, and they're showing that. Whereas if it was something that was like the actors wanted, it wouldn't have caught on like it did.
So let me ask you this. I know it's a worldview issue. We talk about worldview all day. There's a Zogby poll that came out in 2006, and it says a large majority, 84% of adults, stated they are not offended by references to God or the Bible on TV or in movies. But yet Hollywood just seems to push the envelope the other way and take God's name in vain, and they do not put out that kind of content that families would have approved of. And this was in 2006. We're in 2026 now. So isn't that interesting that it is a worldview issue? Because even though some of the good movies would sell, Hollywood says, no, we're going to make this one.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that another way you see it is that I can't ever think, I've worked in the theater for 2 years, and I've watched movies for a long time. I've talked to people about it. I can't ever remember somebody saying, I wish there was more swearing in that movie.
Exactly.
But I've heard the opposite a lot, and yet they still put it in there.
Funny.
But what so much of what it comes down to is these, the director or the producer or the studio has a worldview, and they are going to push it. It's one of the reasons why, with Christian films, a lot of times they get a bad rap because they force, and I'm not trying to judge them for this, but the gospel gets forced into it, so it's not good storytelling. Yeah. It doesn't come through naturally, and so they just kind of tack it on there. And I understand why they're doing it. Look, if I raise $2 million to make, this is my a labor of love, and I finally get the chance to share this message, of course I want to have the gospel. And so I understand exactly why they're doing it, but I think we need to do a better job of if I can say storytelling, so that we write it in a way that it actually comes through clearly and it fits. And then you make a good film. You're telling a good story with the best message that you can share. And it's the same thing when you see movies forcing ideas in where they don't belong, and we get turned off by that even when it's messaging from the other side. So I just think that. It's very clear that in the last 8 years or so, where Hollywood said, hey, in order to be considered for an Oscar, you have to have X number of minorities. You have to have all of these different, boxes that you check. Yep. And I haven't seen it yet, but based on what it looks like, the new Odyssey movie, by Christopher Nolan, looks like that's exactly what they're doing. Just checking boxes, and it looks like it's going to be terrible as a result. But maybe I'm wrong, but
side issue. Does it seem like Hollywood sometimes is running out of ideas because they're always trying to remake something or bring an old cast back or something? But I need to mention the websites where this is available, guys. Before we run out of time, Watch What You Watch can be found at answersingenesis.org under the store, and also it is on Amazon. It just came out, within a month or so, month and a half. Watch What You Watch is on Amazon, so look that up by Tim and Casey, and also Brian Osborne. So we're under 3 minutes already, Tim. Sorry about that. Want to just talk about the end of your book. Who am I? Why movies resonate? I think we already touched on that. Watch What You Watch and behind the scenes. Whatever you'd like to share in the last couple minutes, sir.
Yeah, so the behind the scenes and the gag reel is sort of like, fans of the show would appreciate it because it goes into talking about some of the gaffes that we've made and things. It's the show is lighthearted. We have a lot of fun, but we're also still serious on what we're presenting. So, it really reflects both our personalities. So I wanted the book to have that vibe as well. But the identity thing, or the why they resonate, if you think about some of the themes that can be portrayed really, really well in movies, sacrifice is a big one. You see, you think about characters who are willing to lay down their life for a friend. Jesus said, greater love had no man than this, that he would be willing to give his life for his friend. Well, you see that sometimes portrayed in movies really, really well. You see redemption. In fact, we crave to see a redemption arc where a character is flawed or they've done something terrible. We want to see them, repent of that and be made whole. And there's times where movies do that really well. Courage and how about underdogs? Who doesn't love an underdog? Somebody who is downtrodden, like Rocky. He has no business being in there, but he just refuses to quit. And that's what we want, right? It's inspiring. I don't know about you, but as an athlete, if I see the rocking training montage, as soon as the music hits, I got to go work out.
Yeah.
I'm inspired. I have to go do it. And, it's just so movies can do things in a really positive way. They can portray godly values, even if they don't know that they're doing it, because these directors and everybody else, they're made in God's image, and God has put eternity in their hearts. It's there, and sometimes it comes through when they don't realize it. All that to say, there's a lot of junk, and so there are a lot of bad messages too. And so I'm not endorsing any of these movies, saying you got to go watch them. I will make sure I don't endorse one movie, and that is The Last Jedi, which is the worst movie ever made. And
what was
The Last Jedi, the Star Wars Episode 8, which that's the theme of the postmodern chapter. I think that movie should be called Postmodernism 101. If you want to know what postmodernism is, that's the movie. Tear down every single thing that has come before. They even say it multiple times. Kill the past, or let the past die. Kill it if you have to. It subvert every single expectation and do the exact opposite of what should be done. It's a perfect example of what postmodernism is.
Tim, I'm glad you wrote this book. We really need to be discerning as the body of Christ. Entertainment is such a huge issue, and Christians need to watch what they watch. Again, friends, you can go to Answers in Genesis under store or on Amazon. Brother, it went by so fast. Thanks for your time. We'll do it again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, David. Good to see you again.
God bless you, friends. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.